On a dark, stormy night in 1977, a killer lurked in the woods around Camp Scott, where 149 and 10-year-olds was settling down for the night. But this was no cheesy slasher movie villain. This was a true monster. 3 children, killed in the most brutal way possible. This is the story of the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders, America's worst child killing, and you're tuned into Evidence Obscured, the place where the deepest, most vile killers are placed under the microscope. If that's the kind of content you're looking for, you've come to the right place. We don't sugarcoat things here. Subscribe and let's get into it. You'd think that this would be a simple open and shut case. Terrible as it was, the guy was caught and put in jail. But it's not even close to that simple. This one gets so weird that it borders on supernatural. So stick with me. The weirdness starts months before the murders and continues for years after the perpetrator was caught. Camp Scott, where the murders occurred, was a 140-acre plot that had multiple campsites on it. Each site had 8 to 10 tents arranged in a half-moon pattern. Each of those tents could house 4 people. The campsite in question was named Kiowa, and 2 months before the Girl Scouts arrived, there were camp counselors housed there for training. Mostly 17 to 21-year-old kids getting familiar with first aid and the general area. Someone kept breaking in to steal food and prescription glasses while the counselors were out for training. He'd ransack the tents, take all the eyeglasses he could find, try them on in the woods, and throw the ones that didn't suit him on the floor. That's an important piece of information, those glasses, so keep a pin in that for now. The person was also very, very disturbed. He scribbled in one counselor's notepad pages and pages of the same sentence over and over again. We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in tent 1. Again, I have to point out 2 details that you need to keep in mind. First, the word we, suggesting that more than one person was breaking in, and the term tent 1. The half-moon shape that the tents were placed in were numbered 1 to 8, though none had signs on them to indicate which was which. Depending on which side you approached the campsite from, the first tent in line could be thought to be number 1. So even if our victims were sleeping in tent number 8, the killer could easily have thought it to be number 1 because he approached it from the woods direction. And that tent was the farthest removed from the counselor's tent and the dining tent, the one that was the most secluded. The counselors reported stolen items, footsteps outside their tents at night, and seeing a man in the woods. All of these reports were ignored since there was no violence and none of the items stolen were of great value. 2 months go by, and the Girl Scout troops are lining up to board the buses that are going to take them on a 2-week trip in the woods. Among the girls were Doris Denise Milner, age 10, who everyone called Denise, Michele Heather Guse, 9 years old, and Lori Lee Farmer, who was just 8 years old. Denise was terrified of being without her mother and sister, Kathy, for 2 weeks. Right after Denise got on the bus, Kathy turned to her mother and said, "Mama, what happens when people die?" When her mother asked her what prompted such a question, Kathy replied, "Tomorrow, everyone's gonna die." I know, literal chills down my spine. Years later, Kathy did not recall saying these words, but I think we can all agree that if there's such a thing as a psychic prediction, then little Kathy made one that morning. Denise, Michele, and Lori were initially placed in tent number 8 with another girl, but that girl was moved last minute to another campsite to be with her usual troop. Think about that for a second. Each tent was supposed to hold 4 girls, but now, thanks to a last-minute change-up, there were 3 girls in that tent. 2 months before, the burglar stated that he'd kill 3 girls in that tent, not 4 like the amount of beds would imply. 3, not 4. 2 predictions made 2 months apart. I told you that this was going to get weird. Hold on, it gets even stranger. That night it started to rain. All the children in Camp Kiowa were hyped up and excited. So understandably, most of them were still awake and giggling at 10 that evening. At 11, a child remembered hearing a soft scream, but they thought it was someone having a nightmare, or maybe the rain was distorting the regular chatter of girls in another tent. At 1 a.m. that morning, a counselor thought she heard moaning, but she saw nothing when she went out to look. And even more children saw a flashlight in the woods that were right by tent number 8. The first counselor that woke up that morning was on her way to the showers when she saw a girl lying on the ground on top of a sleeping bag. It was Denise Milner, beaten, naked from the waist down, and assaulted. Next to her was another sleeping bag. Inside of it was little Lori, bludgeoned over the head. And under the sleeping bag was Michele, also with wounds on her head. All three of them dead and impossibly tiny in death. Lori and Michele, it seems, were struck on their heads while they were sleeping in their cots, killing them instantly. But Denise was bound, assaulted, and only after being subjected to all of that was she strangled to death. The killer then carried their bodies out to the open, probably with the intention of them being found by the other children at the camp. So apparently, killing 3 children wasn't enough. He needed to traumatize as many kids as possible. All 3 girls had DNA on their bodies, though Denise, it seems, was the only one who was alive when the killer assaulted her. Lori and Michele were already deceased when they were assaulted. The tent was an absolute bloodbath. There was so much blood that it was trickling out the door. Inside, police found 2 footprints in blood, a pair of prescription glasses that were stolen from the counselors 2 months before, and a flashlight. It was one of those heavy-duty flashlights that are pretty heavy and noisy. The killer had stuffed newspaper into the battery cavity to keep the batteries from rattling around, and he taped the bulb window shut, allowing only a small sliver of light to escape from what would have otherwise been a much brighter flashlight than your standard unit. Clearly, he'd done all of this to keep himself hidden from the campers, and the glasses proved that he was the one who'd been breaking in for months. Scent dogs were brought in, but all 3 of them lost their minds inside those woods. They ran around in circles, barked up at the trees, and all 3 died by the end of the week. 2 dropped dead in front of their handlers for no reason at all. The other ran into oncoming traffic. People started talking. Those woods were native country, full of caves, lore, shaman magic, and spirits. Whoever had done this was utilizing the power of some other world to confuse the dogs, to spook the people, and to cover his tracks. They weren't entirely wrong about that. Police were running on a hunch. They were aware that there was an escaped convict that they had long suspected was hiding out in these woods. Gene Leroy Hart was a Native American man with terrible eyesight and who was serving a 300-year sentence for kidnapping and assaulting 2 pregnant women. He fully intended to leave them for dead, but one woman escaped, saving their lives. The assault was so hideously brutal that he was served the absolute maximum amount of time possible. The local medicine man, forced by his own traditional vows, was supplying Hart with rudimentary medical assistance from time to time, but not even he knew where Hart was hiding. Police had been searching for Hart for 4 years since he escaped from jail, but finding him in the hundreds of caves and gullies and hidey holes in the Oklahoma woods was like finding a needle in a haystack. Then there were the thefts. Hart was sustaining himself by stealing food and supplies from any house that looked unattended, and he had a specific habit of stealing any prescription glasses he could get his hands on. Yep, just like he'd done in the counselors' cabins. A local man also reported a heavy-duty red flashlight stolen from his shed, exactly like the one they'd found in the victims' cabins. They also found a cave 2 miles from Camp Scott. Inside was signs that someone had used it as a permanent living space for years. There were batteries that matched the ones in the flashlight at the crime scene, tape that matched the ones used to restrain the girls, and prescription glasses that belonged to the counselors, and his shoe size matched the ones found at the cabin. And most damning of all, Hart left a message behind for police. Written on the wall were the words, "The killer was here. That date is just 4 days after the murders, and around the same time that the searchers and their dogs had passed close by the cave." So where was Hart then? Well, it took them a year to find him, hiding inside the medicine man's cabin. While he was awaiting his trial under lock and key, a pair of shoes showed up at Camp Kiowa, Denise Milner's shoes. The camp had been abandoned after the murders. Their killer was in jail, and the original investigators didn't even realize that the shoes were missing at all. Yet, here they were, snuck into the camp right under two guards' noses. No one's been able to explain how they got there or who put them there. The trial that followed was pretty quick, and it didn't turn out how you'd expect. Hart was found not guilty. Even with all the evidence in the cave and even a strand of hair found on Denise that matched Hart, they couldn't definitively link him to the murders. This was the 70s, after all. Even these pieces of evidence were circumstantial without the use of DNA. But remember, Hart still had 300 years to serve behind bars for those two attempted murders, so the families took at least some solace in that. 67 days after the verdict, Hart dropped dead of a heart attack. The DNA has been run twice since then. Both times the sample was so degraded that no conclusive match has ever been determined. In 2022, authorities made public that the DNA evidence strongly suggests Hart's involvement, but like I said, the match cannot be 100% confirmed. And that's where we stand now. Officially, the case is unsolved. So, was it Hart? Almost definitively. But the real question is, did he have help? Many don't believe that one man could have had committed these murders without the rest of the camp knowing about it. And they argue that him surviving out there for 4 years would be impossible without an accomplice. I disagree. Laurie and Michele were killed so quickly that Hart, a grown man, could have easily overpowered Denise. It was raining, kids were noisy, and the cabin was far removed from the rest. Hart had been in those woods for 4 years. He knew better than anyone how to get around. As for the shoes, well, I'm going to put that alongside the scent dogs mysteriously dying and the multitude of cryptic sightings and age-old tales of witches and spirits in those woods. Or the reports from searchers and officers on the case that claim that they were plagued by nightmares right up until Hart was caught. One of many of those extremely weird things that seem to haunt this case no matter where you turn to. And in the middle of it all, 3 little girls are still dead. Denise, who loved to read, Michele, who grew prize-winning flowers, and Laurie, who was the best big sister and who dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Just gone. No parent should ever have to bury a child, and no child should ever have to learn that there truly are monsters hiding in the dark, or what those monsters are capable of. See you in the next one, people.